Recently, Secretary Driscoll testified in front of the Appropriations Committee that he refused to strike the names of 2 female and 2 black officers from a promotion list due to their exemplary service, names which were ultimately removed. Did you order him to strike those names?
I know we removed those names. I did.
Pete Hegseth didn't get exposed because the questions were unfair. He got exposed because the questions were simple. He walked into Congress asking for 150 cents trillion, but when pressed on fired military leaders, blocked promotions, and why black and female officers were removed from advancement lists, he had no clean answer, no clear justification, and no real accountability. He hid behind procedure, dodged the substance, and acted like raw power was a substitute for leadership. If you want control over a $1 trillion military budget, you don't get to mumble excuses when Congress asks why qualified people are being pushed out. That hearing made one thing painfully clear. Hegseth wants the money, the authority, and the loyalty, but not the scrutiny.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. Thank you, Secretary Hegseth, General Kane, Mr. Hurst, for being here today. You know, after I was honorably discharged from the Army Reserve, the GI Bill helped me go to school and ultimately become a lawyer. My focus was representing clients who were wrongfully terminated or faced discrimination and harassment at the work. Mr. Secretary, if I were in the courtroom trying to prove that you discriminate against our military heroes, I wouldn't have to look very far or very hard. In just 16 months, you have fired more than a dozen senior military leaders. You've delayed or canceled the promotion of even more. Your chief of staff told the Secretary of the Army that President Trump would not want to stand.
That's not true. That was totally false reporting.
I'm not getting to my question yet, Mr. Secretary. Yeah, you told the President, the Secretary of the Army that the President would not want to stand next to a black female officer at the military events. But, you know, despite all of this, I remain very hopeful that you can and will do better for the men and women who have dedicated their lives to protect our great country. You're here to ask for $1.5 trillion. That's a huge budget, and I want to make sure that you have the ability to manage it. Secretary Hegseth, you would agree with me when I say that we want the most qualified people in every position of our military, correct? That's a question.
Yes.
Thank you. General Kane, you would want the same?
Yes.
Thank you. You know, I share the bipartisan concern about the firing of General George. And what I and the American people want to know from you is, did you ask the President for his permission before you fired General George, Secretary Hegseth?
It is my responsibility to confer with the Commander-in-Chief on especially high-level personnel matters. And ultimately, I won't relay what was discussed, but he was aware of the action that would be taken.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And when you made the decision to fire General George, did you consult Secretary Driscoll?
There had been multiple consultations over a year, yes.
Do you and Secretary Driscoll have a good working relationship?
Yes, I appreciate the work he's doing for the Army.
And for the record, would you agree that Secretary Driscoll is doing a great job as the Secretary of the Army?
I appreciate the work that the Secretary is doing and made the personnel change based on the Chief of the Army.
In fact, he was so good that at his job that the President sent him to Ukraine to negotiate a peace deal. Do you know why the President chose to send him over you?
I'm grateful that the President puts in players at key moments to advance policy priorities, and that's what occurred there, and I was very supportive of it at the time.
Recently, Secretary Driscoll testified in front of the Appropriations Committee that he refused to strike the names of 2 female and 2 black officers from a promotion list due to their exemplary service, names which were ultimately removed. Did you order him to strike those names?
I know we removed those names. I did.
Okay. Why?
Because we review every general officer. You mentioned 12 general officers have been reviewed. The number's much higher than that. I would also note that under Barack Obama, 197 general officers were removed. So this is not something specific to this administration. Every officer serves at the pleasure of the President. And when they need to be removed in order to ensure we have the right leadership in those services, I will make those calls regardless of what you might say from the dais.
You know, about a year ago, the Army began their transformation initiative. I'm all for modernization, but this process seems to have been completely rushed in a way that compromises our readiness, including deactivating a medical evacuation Black Hawk unit at Joint Training Forces Base, Los Alamitos. I've heard recently from senior Army officials who support slowing down the Army Transformation Initiative, specifically as it relates to aviation. Secretary Hegseth, can you commit to slowing down ATI as it relates to aviation?
There are multiple places inside ATI that we are reviewing to ensure that we do not create capability gaps inside today's Army based on the fights we have today and the fights of the future. And this budget reflects ensuring that we don't have any operational gaps in the Army or any of the services.
Mrs. Secretary, during your opening, you brought up this beautiful slide, and you talked about the Arsenal of Freedom. It's the Arsenal of Freedom slide, talking about private investment, from the $1.5 billion. RTX was on there, Boeing, GE, L3 Harris, Lockheed. My question to you is, do you or your wife have any personal investment in those companies?
No.
Thank you.
Pete Hegseth walked into this hearing with a massive request. $1.50 trillion for the defense budget. But instead of showing himself as a leader with the courage, transparency, and competence to manage a giant military machine, he revealed exactly what Congress should fear most: enormous power in the hands of someone who cannot clearly explain his own serious decisions. When he was questioned about firing senior military leaders, delaying or canceling promotions, and especially removing Black and female officers from promotion lists, Hegseth failed to offer any specific explanation that was convincing. He did not clearly say where they fell short, what they did wrong, or which standard they failed to meet. Instead, he hid behind vague language about reviews, presidential authority, personnel process, and even dragged in the Obama administration to distract from the issue. That is not the answer of a strong leader. That is the dodge of someone who knows he has been hit exactly where he is weakest. What makes this even worse is that Hegseth wants Congress to believe he is acting in the name of the most qualified people, the right leadership, and a stronger military. But when he was pressed to explain why officers with exemplary service were removed from advancement lists, his answer was basically empty. If those decisions were truly based on merit, where is the evidence? If this was a professional decision, what specific professional standard was used? If there was no politics, no bias, no purge, then why couldn't he say that clearly in public? A man asking for control over a massive defense budget cannot simply say, "We reviewed it," and expect everyone to shut up. The military is not Pete Hegseth's personal property. The officers who serve this country are not political chess pieces he can casually sweep off the board. Even more outrageous is how Hegseth tried to turn accountability into a political argument. When questioned about personnel decisions, he did not focus on explaining his own actions. Instead, he compared the situation to the number of officers removed under Barack Obama. Wait, that is a familiar dodge. Avoid answering the present question by dragging the audience into the past. But the question here is not, what did Obama do? The question is, what did Pete Hegseth do? Why did he do it? And was it fair? When a leader cannot defend his decisions with concrete facts and has to rely on political comparisons to save himself, that is not strength, that is weakness. This hearing also exposed a much bigger problem. Hegseth wants maximum power while avoiding basic accountability. He wants to be trusted with $1.50 trillion. He wants to decide who gets promoted, who gets removed, who stays, and who gets pushed out. He wants to reshape the military through major transformation initiatives. But when Congress asks the most basic questions, who made the decision, what standard was used, who was consulted, and whether these changes could create capability gaps, his answers become vague, defensive, and unfocused. That is extremely dangerous. A powerful military cannot be run on foggy explanations. A massive defense budget cannot be handed to someone who demands money but refuses to give clear answers. The part about the Army Transformation Initiative makes the situation even more concerning. Modernizing the military is necessary, but modernization does not mean rushing into changes that could create dangerous gaps in readiness. When the questioner raised concerns about readiness, especially aviation and the deactivation of a medical evacuation Black Hawk unit, Hegseth responded with safe bureaucratic language. Things are under review, capability gaps will be avoided. The budget reflects that. It sounds reasonable on the surface, but it is still vague administrative talk. When the issue could affect rescue capacity, combat readiness, and the lives of service members, the public deserves more than foggy reassurance. Then came the question about major defense contractors like RTX, Boeing, GE, L3Harris, and Lockheed. Hegseth answered that neither he nor his wife had personal investments in those companies. His answer was short. No. But the fact that the question had to be asked shows the level of suspicion hanging over the hearing. When someone is asking for a gigantic budget, standing alongside major defense contractors, and making controversial personnel decisions, Congress has every right and every responsibility to ask directly about conflicts of interest. That is not a personal attack. That is oversight. And if Hegseth cannot handle questions like that, then he should not be trusted with even more power. In the end, Pete Hegseth's performance in this exchange did not show a man in control. It showed a man cornered by basic questions. Why did you fire them? Why did you block promotions? Why were black and female officers removed? Why should Congress trust you with $1.50 trillion? And the worst part for Hegseth is that he was not taken down by some complicated political trap or a long speech. He was taken down by a simple truth. When his power was placed under the spotlight of oversight, his answers were not clean enough, not clear enough, and not trustworthy enough.